Welcome to Cause Before Symptom with your host, James Carner.
World War II, the Zionist Banker War to destroy Christianity. A follow-up from last night's show. Stick around. Welcome to Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Today, October 14th, 2025. Tonight's episode is all about World War II. The real reason we went to war again. A world war, which was senseless, stupid, but gave the world an immense amount of power when it comes to the elites, gave them Israel, hell, and it's just a pain in the ass. But we have to understand the real truth, okay? Because if you go, like, if you're in school, those books in school, the scholars say is the real information, the real triggers, the real reason why we went to war. And they're wrong. On purpose. Because they don't want you to know the real truth. Because God forbid if you did any personal research on your own, you'll find out what they hid. Well, this show is all about exposing evil. It's about finding the cause and not talking about the symptoms. And the cause is when I say they, I would say that the greedy dynasties that have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, they want their Jesus. That's really what it's all about. It's a holy war. And it's been going on for thousands of years. In fact, we can predate it to at least 5,000 with actual proof. Yes. But that's how it goes. Shout out to everybody on the live chat Rumble. Number one warrior, we've got Jeffrey saying, hey, y'all. So I noticed when on TikTok, it glitches around 2 a.m. And then I start seeing info like rainstorms or like Hitler's speech translated. I don't see it around 2 a.m., but it wouldn't surprise me. I don't know what that's about. But I do know that I've seen the TikToks where they translated Hitler's speech, and it sounds exactly like what the current right in America is fighting about, is fighting for. It sounds if Hitler would be released onto America and started giving a speech about Germany, then America would be like, yeah, that's what we want. Except for the hatred for Jews, right? You see, the real thing is, it's like they want you to feel like you are anti-Semitic. They want you to think that you are because you're against the Zionist movement. Well, it has nothing to do with the blooded Jews. It has nothing to do with the land. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the bankers who are posing as fake Jews. That's what it's all about. So, no. The people who are searching for the truth are not anti-Semitic. And all of those, white supremacist movements and the fascist movements, all of them, they want you to think that that's the people who are the truthers, and it's not. Those are all paid propagandists. They're all paid to give the illusion that the right are the Nazis, and they're not. Okay, but they're being used for what they did back around World War I, World War II. So if we don't learn from history, then we're doomed to repeat it. And guess what? We're going to repeat it again. because it really looks like that America is in the exact same boat that Germany was pre-World War I. The only difference is Germany wasn't the number one big military in the world. So they didn't have that going for them. We do. So that's going to be a different thing, right? If they unleash America as Germany 2.0, it's going to be different. Not like Germany 1.0. Number 2 warrior is Scorpion saying, hey, y'all, I'm out with some friends, and I'll try to catch up with you guys soon. See ya, Scorpion. Have fun. Number 3 is Texas Militia, Zacky Zach. What's up? Howdy. Number 4 warrior is Boots saying, hey, we're all just living, L-I-V-I-N, living warriors. Come out and pray, yay. Hi, Pastor James Carner of the Airwaves and Warrior family. Hoping everyone is all right. And let's go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. Yes, please. Rumble only gives me love when you hit the thumbs up button, and they don't when it comes to subscribers. And Jeffrey says, hey, brother, no problem. Enjoy yourself. Talking to Scorpion. And Jeffrey says, I like the hat, James. Well, it's getting cold in Central Oregon. We're 3,500 feet above sea level. And it gets cold here. I'm not in the valley in Oregon where it's, still around the 60s and 70s during the day. No, instant. It's like someone turns a switch and we go from 90-degree weather, 80-degree weather to 50. It just like that. In fact, last night, it got down to 36 degrees where, yes, we have had many times snow in October in Central Oregon. Go figure. Holland is here, and so Holland says, hey, brethren and James. Hey, guys, what's up? Sheila is here saying, sup, buttercups. Buckle up, buttercups. Jeffrey says, by the way, I've seen videos that America has been attacking countries who have artifacts that are from the old age that they really want things hidden. I don't know. Maybe. I think the last big artifact that was found was Gobi Tepelepi or Tepeli or Gobli Tepeleki, which was in Turkey, and it proves that there was a civilization 10,000 years ago. I think they're a little wrong on the numbers there. You can't really trust the archaeologists. They get a little ahead of themselves, and later down the road, it turns out to be they were wrong. All right, so I'll give it 100 years before I make my decision on how old that place is. But regardless, it has some ancient structures that have carvings that we just can't explain. The stuff that modern science can't figure out. But hey, that's just what that is. And Holland says, as a Jew myself, I don't like Israelis, but I love Israelites. A lot of Americans are insane. Well, the Bible says that after Jesus died and paid for the atonement, all of us are now the Jews. The Gentiles became God's favorite people. The whole favoritism stopped at Jesus' blood. So there are no favorites. Everyone are the favorites, meaning every country, every person that's born, all of that stuff. So, this isn't about anti-Semitism. It's about bankers. Now, am I anti-banker? Absolutely. Anti-banking, international banking, actually. Ones that use secret services of other countries to go inside another country, split it apart, create division, start a riot, start a war, civil war, and then they put in their own dictator that they choose, right, CIA, and then after they get in, then they do all of America's bidding, and we exploit their resources. I'm against that, those kinds of bankers. I'm also against the kinds of bankers that are religious. Okay, I don't like international bankers that have more money than all countries combined making decisions for us. I'm anti that. I'm anti-banker, right? Now, I'm not anti-banker when it comes to a dude that works at a bank. I'm not against the employees of banks. I'm not even against people who own banks. I'm anti-central bank. You know, the banks that monitor all the other banks and report directly to the elites who's making money, who's not, who to go after and who not. See, I'm anti-central bank and anti-international banks. I say if you have a country, keep your money there. Don't get into other people's business, but that's just me. Jeffrey says they went in to take that from another country. Gilgamesh. Yeah, as Jeffrey was saying, yeah. Well, that's the rumor. We don't really have much evidence. At least I haven't really done too much work into figuring out if the Iraq War was really about getting Gilgamesh and resurrecting him. But it would make sense, according to my interpretation of prophecy, when it comes to the end of days, we still need the Antichrist to show up. And the Bible does say that the Antichrist that does show up is the one of old who is new. So it's got to be Gilgamesh, you know, that would make sense. And so, yeah, if Iraq was holding Gilgamesh, they needed his DNA because they wrapped him like a mummy. And then they just make another one. They clone that bastard. That makes sense. Sheila says, hey, I have zero problems with anyone. I have a major problem with lies and fake, flat out a-holes. Well, I could agree with you there. Let's get into shitty, breaking news, if you like.
Welcome to Shitty Breaking News with your host, James Carner, offering his shitty opinion.
Hamas returns 4 more bodies of hostages. Bodies, says Israeli army. Well, it doesn't look like the whole peace thing is going so good with Trump, is it? Trump says U.S. will disarm Hamas if it does not do so itself. How is he going to do it? Well, he's going to do it militarily, right? Well, and also I've been seeing a lot of, I don't know if it's true or not, but videos of Israel still blowing up Hamas in Gaza, even though there was a ceasefire, but I don't know. Trump honors Charlie Kirk with Presidential Medal of Freedom on what would be, what does it say? What would be his 32nd birthday? Oh, Masonic number 32. They're all Satanists. All right. That's all I'm saying. Charlie Kirk, working for the bad guys. You know, he inadvertently was groomed or wanted to be groomed by these bankers. That's what I'm going to say. And the bankers got him his platform, made his money, and he really thought he was doing a good thing in the name of Jesus. But unfortunately, he didn't understand who his enemy really was. That's Charlie's fault. He didn't understand the enemy was the bankers. And they're really good at sliding into your family and getting into your business. You've got to have discernment. You got to really, really, really not trust anyone. And I do believe that turning point, which you're seeing that everywhere. Everyone's saying turning point. It's in the script now. This is bringing the toll booth Jesus back to America to go to war against Islam, which is what Albert Pike predicted. That's what he predicted, and I believe he did write that letter to Giuseppe Mazzini. But what do I know? Both parties brace for long conflict as government shutdown hits 2 weeks. 2 weeks! That was my Total Recall impression. Thank you. And how long will you be staying here on Mars, ma'am? 2 weeks. I loved that movie. I don't care if it was satanic. Loved it. Forgive me, Lord. All right. tonight, major media outlets, including Hex's former employer Fox News, decline to sign new Pentagon reporting rules. Oh, well, the Pentagon is basically saying, you can't ask these certain questions anymore. How about that? And I guess they're all supposed to sign a documentation saying you can't ask those questions. You know, now here's the thing. This isn't anything new. Okay, they're just now putting it out in the public because they're going to use this politically against the Trump campaign. But almost all of the news agencies, they all have a list of talking points and questions when it comes to arriving at the White House or arriving at the Pentagon. And sometimes a press agent will go rogue against the script and ask a really tough question, and they get reprimanded, but they let it slide. But hey, that's how it's always been. We haven't been a country of open books and honesty and free press. It's always been locked down. You're just seeing it come out now because it's being politicized, because we're all starting, not all, but some people are starting to wake up, and a majority are waking up too much that they have to now use this as political to get us to not focus on the fact that the bankers are still stealing trillions of dollars from the American people every year. That's all. And with new cuts at CDC, some fear that there's nobody to answer the phone. They cut the Center for Disease Control, which is not federal. It's a private company. Okay, it's a private organization. They're not federal. But they receive a ton of money through NGOs and bribes and payoffs. And the CDC, they're not for the people. They're about making they're about making policy to help weaponize viruses to harm people. Unless they can prove to me that they're not, I'm not going to buy it, because I just don't trust very many people. Do you guys trust the media? Do you guys trust the CDC? Do you guys trust the NIH? Do you guys trust the International WHO, the World Health Organization? And when they say, do this, do you trust it? Why is it that a lot of people do? I think it's because they want to believe that the world and everything around them is not corrupt. And so they want to believe that this world is not bad and that there are some good people. Well, yes, there are some good people, but they're not put in leadership positions because they will not help the elite bankers make money. We don't trust any institution until they can give us proof that we can trust them. And all throughout the years, there has not been any proof that we can trust any medical association, any NIH place or CDC or FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, because none of them are healing people. You see, we've got CRISPR technology. We can change DNA. We can do all kinds of things that could heal Americans and heal the world. But they're not saying anything. They're not releasing anything. They're not saying, we just healed this. It's done. It's eradicated. There was only one major announcement worldwide that Russia has a pill you can take for the rest of your life and you won't die of cancer. But if you have cancer. You see, none of these institutions are about healing. They're about figuring ways out so that you pay a monthly fee to their donors. It's a pay-to-play game to live on Earth. So unless they come out every year with a new thing of eradicating some disease. Hey, we've eradicated this disease like polio. They had, ever since, it's like during the 50s, 60s, they stopped eradicating any disease or virus. They can't even cure the fucking common cold. They can't cure the flu. But they can sure as hell fucking weaponize it in Chicago and give it to China for further amplification. That's what we found in real documentations about the NIH sharing weaponization of the influenza COVID-19 virus. They were sharing information with China, and then China went, oops, we let it out. So you have to give me your trust first before I put my whole heart into it, okay? Because I'm seeing no data, nothing backing up saying, hey, we have healed people. No, all they can do is suppress symptoms. That's it. Well, suppressing symptoms isn't good enough. Not with the trillions of dollars have gone into all medical fields, and especially the billions of dollars every year that goes into fighting cancer. They don't even know what cancer is. When you ask a doctor, what is cancer? Parasite, virus, bacteria, what? They don't know. And they don't know where it comes from. Oh, we don't know. California will just label anything as cancerous and slap a warning on it, so you can't sue California for getting cancer. But everyone's getting cancer, and they don't even know what it is, where it comes from, the origins of it. We should be smart enough to know that cancer is, this isn't true, but they could say cancer started in Hungary in 1754 when some dude had sex with sheep, and literally it metamorphosed into this sexually transmitted disease, and then it turned into this. We should have enough data to find the source of all diseases. We should. But they're not doing dick. The reason why is because there's no money in healing you. There's no money in eradicating diseases, okay? But there is a lot of money going towards weaponizing, okay? They call it gain of function to make it sound like, hey, everything's okay. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. It's just what we're doing is we're gaining the function of a virus. We're going to gain a little bit more function on top of it. Well, why don't you reverse that and kill the fucking thing? How about that? Why don't you just reverse it and kill the fucking thing? How about that? Is that so hard to do? Reverse it, fucking kill it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm kind of in a fucking fuck mood right now. Hey, that's just how it is. Some days I'm really great. Father, forgive me, for I've got a potty mouth, but so did Peter. There's got to be some team of people working on eradicating diseases and putting a stop to them. But no, there's not. There's just a bunch of new vaccines that come out that we all have to take and put our trust in to defeat older stuff, but nothing new. But they can't get cancer. I'm just saying, think, question. Don't put your faith in any institution. That's just me. Maybe you share the same sentiment. I don't know. And that's shitty, opinionated, crappy news. All right, we're going to go to a quick commercial. When we come back, we're going to talk about World War II. The whole shebang, why it's here, and what you can do about it.
Do you have tax burdens? Do you carry personal liability? If so, let me tell you why you have tax burdens and personal liability. And if you stick with me until the end, I'll share a simple solution to reduce the burdens you carry. When you put assets in your name, you also carry the liability. And by setting up a corporation, LLC, or partnership, you also carry the liability for the share of ownership you have in these organizations. So when you receive a W-2 form, 1099, or K-1 at the end of each year, that shows your liability for the assets you have carried in your name or your business name. The flow of liability works this way. You get a job, you take money in your name. When you are a contractor, you take money in your name. When you begin a business, you take money in the business name, which is set up with you as the owner. Nelson Rockefeller quoted, "The secret to success is to own nothing but control everything." He said this because when you own something in your name, you also own the liabilities. Introducing the solution. Begin an unincorporated association and remove assets out of your name while remaining in control and management of them. An unincorporated association is a state-registered entity that you can put assets into, is member-based and not tied to your name, has a tax-exempt EIN number, is private and not found when doing an online search. Whether you receive a 1099 or K-1 under your name, consider setting up your own unincorporated association and allow the association to be the owner of your assets and free yourself from the burden of personal liability. P.S. Join our affiliate program and receive payment for referrals.
All right, we're back to the show. I calmed down a little bit. Hey, I wanted to mention again, I've been selling this product. It's called Elite Potion. And there are two bottles. One is Whimsy Worm Wash. The other is Nickel Nixer Elixir. And combined, they get rid of parasites and heavy metals. Now, I know you guys already know about all of this. Well, there are some people that are just watching this, tuning in. I created this originally, well, for two purposes. One, because I did some research about autism and there were some connections to heavy metals and parasites. And two, as I continued to dig deeper into, health in America, I found out that the pharmaceutical industry was started by the Rockefellers, when they actually changed modern medicine from plants to crude oil. And in doing more research on that, it turns out that us eating plastics, well, isn't good for the stomach biome. It turns it upside down. And when parasites and heavy metals are introduced to the stomach, the body, because the stomach's upside down, just can't digest it, can't dissolve it, can't attach to it, bind to it, and get it out of your body. So I created this. And I started giving it to my son, and it has helped tremendously. It has not helped with his severe self-injurious behavior, but it has helped with the behaviors at least by 80%. Meaning, if we go off of this, my son starts to get more agitated, he'll hit his head. When we put him back on, it's back down to 20% instead of the 80% that it was. So yeah, it works for that. And on top of that, when I started to feel really weird, like, man, something in my head, it was like, where I feel like I'm having a stroke or feeling like I'm having anxiety or having even a seizure, and I'm like, man, what is this? And then I take this, and the freaking crap is gone. And what it is it's the heavy metals that we're all inhaling, eating, drinking, that we have no idea is in our environment, and it's causing our brains to get turned to mush. And what the Nickel Nixer Elixir does is it binds to all of those tiny, tiny, tiny powder-like substance of heavy metals that's in your brain. It has the algae inside that can go all the way up through the brain, bind to it, and take it out. Because I'm telling you, after I take my own product, I feel alive, happy, radiant, and it works. And you can tell when I'm not on it because I'm sluggish, tired, and yawning all the time. Guys, this stuff works. I don't sell too many of them every month, like maybe one or two, like of these. That's it. What I do need to do is start doing a campaign to get more, because I need to build up the inventory to buy more. Okay. So we've got to sell 66 bottles. I know it's a cult number, 66, but in all honesty, if I can sell 66 of these, I can then place another order and keep us stocked up, okay? The company's not going anywhere, okay? The company is doing just fine because, we signed up for an unincorporated association, so we're not liable to the IRS because we have a tax-free EIN number. And we're approved by the state of California as an unincorporated association, just like the banks are, just like billionaires do. So we're not worried about that part, but I am worried about getting a new supply. So we need to order another 500 units, and we've got to sell 66 of them to make our target. So I'm going to be doing a push on Elite Potion. If you have taken it before and haven't taken it for a couple months, and you can feel it, and I know you are because you're starting to feel sluggish, put the budget together, do me a favor, help me sell the product. This is the only thing keeping the show going. I don't earn any money on it, but what I do is I give it to my son and I take it myself. Now, I don't pay for it because I created it, but other than that, this is what's keeping me going and making me happy and energetic and keeping my son doing better than he was. So, elitepotion.com, elitepotion.com. All right. And we're going to do a major push on it here, guys. We got to sell 66 units. 66. No, it's not devil worship 66. It's just a number. That's how many we need to sell in order so I can place another order to get it shipped to my house so I can start shipping it to yours. All right. Hey, I do all the shipping myself. Okay. I do all the labeling. All right. I do all the website design. Okay. I do it all. I do it everything. I even host the website on my own hosting company. All right. I do all the work. But I'm also doing this for you guys. All right. Enough of that. Now, let's get into World War II, the Zionist Banker War to destroy Christianity. This is important to understand because last night we talked about World War I and how it started, who started it, and what was the goal. Now you know. Tonight, World War II. Who started it? What are their goals? We're going to go through that as well. Boot says, energy boost I feel from it. Me too. Believe me. I just got back on it. I got off of it because I get lazy at times. That's just how it is. But man, every time I get back on it, I'm just insane. Back to my normal self. All right, so World War II. They told us, the academics, the history writers, all of those who were paid by the elite to tell us that it was a war for freedom, World War II, right? It was a war to stop fascism. Stop fascism! It's everywhere! To liberate the Jews, to secure peace. But what if the war itself was the greatest lie ever told? Just like the Gulf of Tonkin and the sinking of Lithuania? I can't remember what boat it was. Anyway, Gulf of Tonkin, which, we blew up our own ship in America just to go to war in Vietnam. It's all bullshit. All right. But what if the war itself was the greatest lie ever told? What if the blood of millions that was spilled in World War II was not to protect liberty, but to bury the old world and erect a new throne in its place in the next 100 years? Well, what throne is that? Well, it's not a throne of God. It's a throne of Zion. And the Zion of the Zionists, not the Trinity, not the Father in heaven, Jesus Christ, his Son, and the Holy Spirit. No, a throne for a Messiah that's coming that the Zionist Jews are waiting for. And tonight we dig into the war that changed everything, but not through the sanitized textbooks or the Hollywood scripts. We go into the shadows, into the vaults of suppressed documentation, censored truths, and the cries of the innocent used as kindling for a kingdom forged in war. And think about this. What if Hitler was not the origin of evil, but just a tool, an expendable pawn in a chess game played by Zionist bankers who needed the world to be baptized in blood so they could birth their promised land? There's no what if. It really is true. That's what it was. And what if the people claiming to save the Jews ensured they had nowhere to flee but to Palestine. Well, that's interesting. And what if the Holocaust? Oh, I'm just going to get anti-Semitic complaints. What if the Holocaust, instead of being prevented, was managed, delayed, redirected, and weaponized to give the world a reason to bend the knee to the United Nations and carve out a new capital in the land where two temples fell? What if? Well, James, you're a white supremacist. No, I'm not. I'm not about hating any race. I'll hate bankers, but not the people. Just the elite dynasties who control the central banks. I hate them. I'm anti them. And do I hate them in my heart? Well, the Bible says I must love them, but I'm kind of mad at them still, for all the shit that they pulled. But you see, this isn't about denying history. It's not about being a racist or white supremacist or a Hitler wannabe. It's about reading the other side of the scroll, the side that they sealed, the side that the moment you get the book and you read it and you go, wait a minute, they're using the white supremacists on purpose so that people will look at them as hate instead of looking at the truth. Yeah, just like what Hitler did in the book Mein Kampf. You see, there was truth in it about the central bankers, the international bankers that he was an enemy of, okay, that were his enemies. But then he poisoned the book by saying it's the Jews. We must eradicate their bloodline. Well, that's kind of fucked up. So they're wrong. He was wrong. But he should have just went after the bankers. But I do believe that he was just a pawn, okay? They let a little truth in, but started focusing on his hate and racism, and that's what gets people to look the other way. So it's about reading the other side of the scroll. And because in this war, good and evil were not divided by nations, but by altars. Yeah, satanic altars. And those altars were not built to honor God, but to prepare the world for the beast. Now, when Hitler rose, the banks funded him. When Germany bled, the same banks collected their interest. And when the war ended, those same hands drew the borders of modern Israel and raised the phoenix of global government, the United Nations. And tonight we follow the smoke back to the fire and the fire back to the altar, the satanic one, where World War II was not the end of tyranny, it was its coronation. And unless we learn what was truly sacrificed, we'll never understand what spirits sits on the throne that was built. Now, the real cause of World War II didn't begin in 1939 with Hitler's invasion of Poland. It began in 1919 at the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, a document that humiliated, dismantled, and spiritually castrated Germany. It was not a peace treaty, but a veiled act of war. It was crafted by Allied powers with strong Rothschild banking and Zionist banking influence. The treaty was designed not to restore balance after World War I, but to create the conditions necessary for a second, far greater war. One that would finalize global restructuring, financially, and pave the way for the Zionist state in Palestine. So they could bring in their Messiah. At the core of the Versailles deception was Article 231. It's the infamous war guilt clause, which forced Germany to accept full responsibility for World War I. And this allowed the Allies to demand crushing reparations, totaling 132 billion gold marks, which Germany could never realistically repay. And these reparations were not simply financial. They were psychological, spiritual, and generational, meaning religious. Now, the German people were blamed, impoverished, and humiliated. Their economy collapsed into hyperinflation after World War I. Savings were evaporated and children were starving, and desperation took root. Germany was in a bad place after World War I. But the deception runs even deeper. Documents across the archive that I've been putting together, especially the real cause of World War II was the Allies, which is a book I found, The Deception of Germany. All right. And how the Jews forced America into World War I. Well, yeah, that's another book that I found. Revealed that 1918 Armistice itself, what Germans believed was the end of the war, was a trap. Germany laid down its weapons under the belief that peace would be negotiated fairly, based on Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. But instead, they were stabbed in the back by the Zionist Allied Alliance, who rewrote the terms post-surrender. Germany should have saw that one coming. They used this betrayal to crush Germany's will, to bankrupt their economy, and prime the country for revolt, vengeance, and radicalization. Get ready for the MK Ultra. The Weimar Republic, birthed in this chaos, was no republic at all. It was a puppet regime, culturally degenerate, economically raped, and spiritually lifeless. It allowed for mass morale erosion and foreign infiltration. The collapse of the mark in 1923, where it took billions of marks, Deutschmarks, to buy a loaf of bread, billions, was not natural economics. It was engineered economic trauma, orchestrated by the same international bankers and financiers with deep Zionist affiliations, meant to foster resentment and inflame nationalism. And it worked. It worked. The world would watch, too. And a decade later, as Adolf Hitler, funded by shadowy international bankers and backed by secret industry hands, rose on the promise to undo the Versailles Agreement and restore Germany. They were desperate. But Hitler he was not the end game. He was the reaction. And Versailles was the thesis. And the Weimar collapse was the antithesis. You see, Hitler was the synthesis that they needed to move forward and make some money, control the world, and get a hold of the Middle East. Because we need oil, and they've got a lot of it. World War I was the blood sacrifice. Versailles was the covenant. And World War II would be the fire that sealed it up. After the economic dagger of Versailles, Germany was thrust into the cultural and spiritual abyss of the Weimar Republic from 1919 to 1933, a time where many Germans would come to see not just a national humiliation, but as cultural invasion. Through the Republic, or though the Republic was nominally democratic, its media, arts, and financial sectors fell rapidly under disproportionate control of Zionist-aligned elites, primarily Jewish financiers, Zionists, media moguls, and social engineers. This is where Berlin became the playground of liberal decadence and sexual chaos. From documents such as The Jewish Betrayal of Germany and The Bad War, two books that I found, we see that brothels, cabarets, and pornography surged. Public morals eroded as homosexuality, transvestism, and pedophilia were not only normalized, but actually celebrated. Kind of like where America's going right now. Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Science was a Jewish-run operation, promoted early transgender surgeries and radical sexual re-education decades before the West would see similar trends. This was not accidental. This happened before. What we're seeing in America right now. Cultural degeneracy was weaponized. It was a psychological warfare meant to disarm the German soul and reshape its values from within. It mocked Christianity, traditional family roles, and German patriotism. Finance and media, the organs of the perception and survival, were increasingly dominated by foreign hands. Jewish banking families such as the Warburgs and Rothschild agents operated key levers of capital, while German citizens suffered from starvation and mass unemployment. The documents that I have that's in my archive make it very clear that Zionism and German Jewish elites were not aligned on purpose, or were not in purpose, together for a purpose. German Jews, for the most part, wanted to assimilate and preserve their place within the German society. They had no interest in fighting against the Deutschland. But Zionist leaders in London, Basel, and later New York saw them as pawns, expendable, if it served the greater goal, for the devil, the creation of Israel. And to that end, anti-Semitism had to rise. A new pharaoh had to be provoked. Enter Adolf Hitler. God, it sounds so much like what we're going through right now. This is a bitter truth. Many Zionist leaders welcomed the rise of Hitler, not because they supported him ideologically, but because they believed he would drive the Jewish people out of Europe and into Palestine. And stated in How Jewish Leaders Forced Jews to Go to Israel, the book that I have, many Jews who tried to integrate into European life were caught between two fires, the wrath of the nations and the manipulations of the Zionist elite. Now, the backlash against Weimar was swift and predictable. Hitler was not the cause. It was the reaction to imposed humiliation and orchestrated cultural collapse. His speeches, which vilified Marxism, international finance, and sexual degeneracy, resonated with a nation whose spirit had been crushed by foreign control. Oh my God, if only Trump could go up and start speaking like Hitler did, because that's what's happening in America right now, folks, because we're repeating history, okay? And yet even Hitler's rise was facilitated, knowingly or not, by international players who saw in him the vehicle to ignite the next phase of their global plan. The destruction of Germany's soul under Weimar lit the match, and the next chapters would ignite the fire. Now, in the shadow of Versailles and the wreckage of Weimar, a deal was struck that most historians still dare not to speak of. How come they don't talk about this deal? The collaboration between the Zionist movement and the Nazi regime. There's a real deal. Though Hitler's rhetoric demonized Jews, the early years of his rule were marked not by immediate extermination, but by forced emigration and, surprisingly, negotiation. In 1933, a stunning economic development occurred. Judea declared war on Germany. Judea? Not with tanks, but with the global boycott, aiming to suffocate the fragile German economy already staggering from Versailles' agreement. The Daily Express headlined the move. Yeah, we have the pinup, showing that Zionist leadership in the West mobilized their banking and media empires against Hitler's Germany, even before concentration camps were fully established. But simultaneously, and here lies the core paradox, Zionist leaders entered into the Havara Agreement with Nazi Germany. Now, this deal allowed Jews to transfer money and property from Germany to Palestine via the purchase of German goods. In essence, Hitler helped seed the population of what would become the State of Israel. Did you know this? No, because they're hiding it from you. Facilitating Jewish immigration while receiving economic benefits through trade. The German-Jewish transfer agreement was not born from ideological harmony, but from converging interests. Hitler wanted Jews out of Germany. Zionists wanted Jews in Palestine. But it also meant that Zionist elites were willing to sacrifice European Jewry to accomplish the larger goal of a Jewish state. A deeply disturbing notion evidenced in texts such as the book The Real Reason for World War II and the book The Jewish Betrayal of Germany. Now, the boycott, however, backfired. It hardened the Nazi regime. And it led to tighter control over Jews within Germany. Yet the Zionist elite, shielded by distance and wealth, advanced their plan regardless. You see, they saw World War II not as tragedy, but as a divine stage set to bring the Jews home to Palestine. Now, the moral crime of this period is not merely in the hatred of the Nazis, but in the cynical orchestration by the very leaders who claimed to represent the Jewish people. Many assimilated Jews in Germany were horrified by Zionist collusion with Hitler, but their voices were silenced by propaganda and overshadowed by war. The groundwork had been laid down. A global economic siege, a migration funnel to Palestine, and the polarization of Jewish identity worldwide. War was not merely inevitable, it was designed. In comes Churchill, Roosevelt, and the push towards war. While Germany rebuilt itself from the ruins of Versailles, two figures emerged on the world stage whose actions would help guarantee that the war would come again. Sir Winston Spencer Churchill and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Behind their polished speeches and posturing as defenders of democracy, deeper allegiances and unseen hands were moving. Winston Churchill, he was a sir, far from being a neutral observer of European affairs, had long established ties to the Zionist cause. He had supported the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which promised a homeland for the Jews in Palestine, and remained one of its most vocal British champions through the 1930s and 1940s. This was not mere philanthropy. Churchill was deeply enmeshed in London's financial elite, who were invested in a post-Ottoman reshaping of the Middle East. That same network of Rothschild-backed interests that had helped draft Balfour now saw in Hitler a useful enemy in a war, a useful reset. You've heard of those resets? A great reset? 2030? Are we being primed for a new reset? Who's the goon? Who's the goon that can take the right, who are pissed off about perversion in America, and go to war with whoever they want us to go to war with? They could say it's the Muslims. I don't know. But a reset's coming. The global bankers are doing to America what they did to Germany. Can you not see it? If you have watched my show last night and are watching it now, you would see the parallels. Now, at the same time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was navigating a delicate economic crisis at home, the Great Depression. It had hollowed out America's optimism, and Roosevelt's administration, filled with Jewish advisors, not just Jews, but international central bankers, advisors like Henry Morgenthau Jr., Bernard Baruch, and Felix Frankfurter, leaned increasingly toward an anti-German foreign policy. Notably, Roosevelt's foreign policy advisor, Sumner Welles, pushed very hard for U.S. involvement in Europe well before Pearl Harbor. Now, the evidence from multiple sources shows that both Churchill and Roosevelt were heavily influenced by pro-Zionist international bankers and networks. Not simply domestic policy concerns or moral opposition to fascism. when Hitler offered peace multiple times between 1936 and 1939, both Britain and the United States dismissed the proposals out of hand. Why? Because peace would prevent the fall of Germany, the reshaping of Europe, and the necessary sympathy wave required to create Israel. So what are they creating now? You see, they're recreating the tribulation. They just did a peace agreement. They signed a deal. 3 years later, 3.5 years later, it's basically right on time for 3.5 years before Trump leaves office. So what we're going to see, this is my opinion, is since that Middle East peace agreement, that's where peace is going to happen in the Middle East for 3.5 years in sudden destruction, meaning after 3.5 years, there is going to be a world war. This is the plan of the bankers. Someone is going to take Trump's place. Someone is going to have the right back them up through all of the craziness that's been going on in America, where they have been pushing and pushing communism. And the right are going to stand up and actually fall for the next Hitler. Is going to be right after Trump. Could it be J.D. Vance? I don't know. But that's what it looks like is happening. Now, Roosevelt's maneuvering was especially calculated. Even as promised peace to the American public, he worked covertly with British and Polish officials to corner Hitler into war. Britain gave Poland the infamous March 1939 war guarantee, ensuring that Germany's move to Danzig, not the band, not the singer, would be met with global escalation. Poland, emboldened by its promise, refused every negotiation that Germany offered for a peaceful resolution. As documented in several war analyses, Roosevelt's administration played a significant role in urging Poland to resist diplomacy. Now, once the war began, the world's press, largely controlled by the same interests backing the Balfour and the Federal Reserve, framed Germany as the singular aggressor. But behind the scenes, Germany was merely reacting to the encirclement, to the boycott, to the weaponized diplomacy, and to the looming threat of Bolshevik expansion. Hitler's speeches and personal writings reflect desperation to avoid a two-front war, not hunger to dominate the world. But war came, and with it, the death of millions. Sovereign nations fell. Currencies were destroyed. Infrastructure was annihilated. And in the ashes of this global fire, the State of Israel was born. The phoenix rises from the ashes. You see, it's a play of doing the same thing over and over again. It's a loop, and you're caught in it. It's a loop. 3.5 years, starting yesterday when Trump signed that peace deal, we're going to have 3.5 years of peace, and the next 3.5 years is total destruction. A reset, because America is being primed and poised and ready for the right to accept war against some foe that created all of this mess in America of what we call perversion, communism. Well, as I have shown you guys, that Russia and China have absolutely created this shit in America through Chicago, that the left and their goal was to create this. So they are doing and playing their job. It could appear, maybe, that within 3.5 years we could go to war with Russia. That's what it's looking like. Yeah, I have got to get that Power Man 5000 song on. Hop, we're ready to go. Hop. You know, that'd be great. But I didn't get it and have it ready for you. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking is happening, guys. Okay? Because who is going to support it? Think about this. Okay? How in the fuck did all this perversion just start out of the blue? I mean, it started, 8 years? Honestly, it's just been thrown at us. I'm not talking about homosexuality. That's no big deal. But the big deal is where where men want to go into little girls' bathrooms. That's a big deal. All of this push to hurt our people and to turn our society upside down and be so angry that we will accept the war. Now, what if Trump or J.D. Vance, or what if someone on the right comes out and gets into office in 2028, which is real close to the Great Reset years, comes out and says, we found out that Germany and China have been infiltrating America all these years, since and during the Cold War, and they've been bringing in communism and perversity to destroy us from within. Well, the right will be freaking angry and upset. Well, perfect timing to go to war with Russia. That's kind of where it's looking like it, with Russia and China. And when they get the evidence, because there is evidence, the government has the evidence, they've been letting it happen, okay? They've been letting it happen because both branches of the Senate and Congress, they work for the bankers, and the bankers are playing America just like they did Germany. But it makes sense now, doesn't it, guys? We have to understand history before we can understand what's going on right now. Now, America did not stumble into World War II by accident. She was pulled in, she was pushed, and finally shoved into it by a web of policy, pressure, and profit. In the 1930s, the United States was overwhelmingly isolationist, okay? The Neutrality Act, public opinion, and a memory of the blood-stained fields of 1918 all argued against another foreign war. Yet beneath the surface, Roosevelt's administration quietly rewired the nation for global engagement. He used economic tools, sanctions, trade restrictions, embargoes, and lend-lease policies to constrict foes and empower allies. Lend-lease was sold as aid to keep totalitarian regimes at bay, but it also created a wartime industrial colossus in the United States and tied American factories, bankers, and shipyards into a permanent war economy that profited when peace was deferred. Pearl Harbor was the final hinge. Sanctions and oil embargoes pressed on Japan until a cornered militarism reacted. Pearl Harbor gave the administration the casus belli it needed to present war as necessary and unavoidable. And once the United States was in, its industrial might, mobilized by banks, arms firms like, weapon manufacturers, and cartelized suppliers, weapons suppliers, tilted the balance of the planet. Now war became an engine of reconstruction that benefited those who financed it. And those same financial networks that had profited from reparations, debt, and credits in 1919 now profited from the production lines of 1941 through 1945. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, planners were already imagining the map after victory. The Morgenthau Plan, advocated by Treasury Secretary Henry Morgenthau Jr., reveals the economic intent to deindustrialize Germany so thoroughly that it would never again challenge the financial order of Europe. Factories were to be removed, heavy industry dismantled, and Germany reduced to an agrarian backwater. That plan, even if softened later, demonstrates that the Allies' war aims included not merely the defeat of an ideology, but the deliberate reshaping of economic life across a continent. Now, in practice, this meant Germany's capacity for sovereign economic recovery was intentionally crippled, ensuring dependence on external credits and international institutions that followed, meaning they didn't have any money, so they needed foreign interest and foreign money. Now, the media and cultural machines, the newspapers, radio, and later Hollywood, they reframed every atrocity and battlefield loss into a morality play that obscured the underlying commercial and geopolitical motives. Sympathy for victims, outrage at villains, and the moral licensing of winners created the emotional soil in which 1948's Israel could be planted and grown. Domestic politics in America shifted too. Wartime finance normalized deficit spending, centralized planning, and a deeper intertwining of state power with private capital. The result was a United States that emerged from the war economically ascendant, politically committed to a new international order, and spiritually conditioned to accept the narratives that accompanied that order. Remember the Habsburgs? They were one of the 4 German family houses that controlled all of Europe for a long time during the Dark Ages. Well, those 4 families had to go. Germany is where they came from, or originally Austria before it became Germany. Okay, that section. But there in Luxembourg and in that area, that's where these families were, and they had to go. And so in order for Israel to rise, they had to take out those powers. And so World War II put the final nail in the coffin. Now, prophetically, this was the moment when the seeds, and by the way, the 4 German houses, they all split up into the 13 black nobilities that we have right now. Now, prophetically, this was the moment when the seed of a global system was sown, a system that replaced national self-sufficiency with dependency. That traded sovereignty for security, and that consecrated sacrifice as the path to political rebirth. The United States' entry did not simply turn the tide against fascism. It sealed a covenant between the state power and global finance, a covenant that would shepherd post-war institutions, reward those who engineered the conflict, and leave Europe fertile for the planting of a new policy in Palestine. As the smoke cleared from the ruins of Europe and Asia in 1945, the world had changed not only in borders but in their spirit. Sovereign nations, especially Christian monarchies, ethno-states, and anti-communist republics, had been broken down, discredited, or completely replaced. In their place across the new architecture of global oversight, financial discipline, and ideological uniformity. This helped the United Nations get this grip on the people to build things like the WHO, World Health Organization, who want to stick you with stuff that they won't tell you what's in it. This transformation was not an accidental byproduct of war. It was the fruit of a design that leveraged conflict to build consent for centralization. One of the clearest indicators of this new order was the establishment of 3 global institutions within the same post-war window: the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the United Nations. These were not merely forums for cooperation. They were tools to bind once independent nations into networks of oversight and economic management. The International Monetary Fund regulated national currencies and debts. The World Bank lent for reconstruction with strings attached. The United Nations became the moral arbitrator for war and peace, while shielding the victors from its own judgments. Germany, once a sovereign nation with its own cultural and industrial identity, became a partitioned territory occupied and controlled by foreign powers. The Morgenthau Plan, which aimed to strip Germany of all industrial capacity, was partially implemented through factory dismantling, population transfers, and trade restrictions. Even after the plan was softened, its spirit endured. The idea that Germany should never again be a sovereign peer, but instead a monitored participant in a new collective European project. This loss of sovereignty was not limited to Germany either. Italy's monarchy collapsed. Japan's emperor was reduced to a symbolic figure under American occupation. Eastern Europe fell behind an iron curtain where liberation became permanent communist vassalage. Western Europe, meanwhile, began the long slide towards what would become the European Union, a structure that removed economic policy from local voters and placed it in the hands of supranational bureaucrats. Is it all coming together for you, folks? I hope it is. The transformation was sold as peace. In truth, it was pacification. The spiritual force of nationalism, faith-based identity, and local culture was systematically discredited, often by tying it to fascist or bigotry, while secular technocracy was uplifted as the path to progress. Christian moral language was still used, but it was repurposed to defend institutions that advanced global consolidation. Refugee programs, aid conditionality, human rights treaties all became instruments of influence. And the war had succeeded in breaking the old world. But what replaced it was not freedom. It was an international war designed to prevent any challenge to those who finance war, shape post-war reconstruction, and define the acceptable parameter of truth. And at the spiritual level, this marked a critical shift. Mankind no longer trusted in the sovereignty of nations under God, but in the promises of man-made peace and force through debt, diplomacy, and dependency. And from the rubble of World War II rose the blueprint for the end times architecture, a system of nations without power, kings without crowns, and people without true self-determination. It was not a resurrection of justice, but the preparation of a throne, one fit not for Jesus Christ, but for the counterfeit Messiah to come. Now, World War II did not end in 1945. It was merely transformed. The battleground shifted from bullets to narrative, from blitzkrieg to diplomacy, from tanks to tears. As millions reeled from the war's horror, a singular focus began to emerge from the smoke. The Jews must have a homeland, and the world must guarantee it. The Holocaust, an event whose scale and trauma were seared into a global psyche, became the emotional and moral axis around which the birth of Israel was made possible. Zionist leaders, many of whom had long planned for a state in Palestine, seized the moment. They used the catastrophe not only to solicit sympathy, but to apply political pressure, especially on the newly formed United Nations. The displaced persons camps of post-war Europe became staging grounds. Survivors, many of whom had no homes or families to return to, were urged, sometimes even forced, to immigrate to Palestine. But as several documents in my archive reveal, this migration was not entirely organic. The file that I have titled How Jewish Leaders Forced Jews to Go to Israel reveals how Zionist emissaries often used manipulation and even coercion to ensure European Jewry did not resettle in Europe or on the Americas, but went instead to fulfill the Zionist project in Palestine. The British, still holding the mandate over Palestine, were increasingly outmaneuvered. Their efforts to limit Jewish immigration intended to placate Arab resistance were drowned out by a rising chorus of Zionist lobbying, American Jewish influence, and international media campaigns highlighting the plight of the Holocaust survivors. In World War II, Justifies the State of Israel, document that I have, the author details how Zionist propagandists swiftly transformed Hitler's atrocities into a divine license for colonization. European guilt became policy. Sympathy became land. And so in 1947, the United Nations voted for a partition of Palestine, establishing the legal groundwork for Israel's declaration of independence following year. But this was the true purpose of World War II. Was it? I'm pretty sure it was. Was the war in part a Zionist design to establish a foothold in the Holy Land by orchestrating catastrophe? Well, evidence from the information I've got from a document called The Jewish Betrayal of Germany and the Cause of World War II suggests a calculated use of Jewish suffering to birth a geopolitical stronghold, not merely a refuge. In spiritual terms, what occurred was a prophetic counterfeit, a new Israel forged not in obedience to God, but in the crucible of manipulation, war, and human tragedy. The world was emotionally blackmailed into accepting a political Zion built on the graves of the war-torn, while the true children of Abraham, those of faith, remained scattered across the globe. Thus, World War II was not only the war to end fascism, it was the war to create the Zionist state. And the Holocaust, whether fully understood or endlessly debated, was wielded as the moral scepter to silence dissent and crown a nation born of ashes and ambition. This is why Bibi can jump on a plane and tell Congress to make a law that all college campuses and universities cannot protest against that fucking place. That's not freedom. That's not freedom of speech either. While the Western powers bore much of the moral and public burden of creating the State of Israel, the crucial decisive support for Israel's early legal existence came from a most unlikely place. Get this, Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union. Yeah. In a twist that exposes the geopolitical chess of post-World War II realignment. Oh, and by the way, don't forget, they were controlled by the bankers. Okay. The very regime that symbolized iron-fisted atheism, gulags, and communist revolution became an early midwife to the birth of Zion. Oh my God, say it isn't so. It's true. According to a document that I got, How Stalin Created Israel, the Soviet Union was among the first nations to recognize the newly declared Israeli state in 1948. But this wasn't merely symbolic recognition. Stalin's Eastern Bloc allies, particularly the Czechoslovakia, played a pivotal role in supplying arms and military training to Zionist forces at a time when British sought to restrain Jewish militarization in Palestine. So why should Stalin support such a nationalist, Western-aligned project? Well, the answer, according to some document and echoed in a book that I have, Why Did the USSR Help to Create Israel but then become its foe, lies in Soviet strategy. Stalin hoped that the new Israel state, built in part by Eastern European Jews with socialist ideals, would align with the communist bloc. He also viewed mass Jewish immigration from the USSR and Poland as a way to rid his regime of what he saw as political liabilities. Jews who might not be fully loyal to Soviet aims or who could become internal dissidents. And in this window of history, the interests of Zionism and communism temporarily aligned. The Zionists needed legal and military support. The Soviets needed to shift their Jewish population and undermine British control in the Middle East. Zionist leaders knew that playing both sides, wooing the West while quietly accepting the Soviet help, was essential for survival. But the alliance was short-lived. Once it became clear that Israel would not be a socialist satellite, but a pro-Western stronghold aligned with American interests, Stalin turned hostile. Within a few years, the USSR pivoted to support the Arab states against Israel and launched brutal anti-Zionist purges within its own borders, framing Zionism as a tool of Western imperialism. The Soviet betrayal of Zionism was not a moral about face. It was a strategic correction. Stalin had miscalculated, and so once again, the Jewish people were used as pawns in a broader war of empires, but this time by both capitalist democracies and communist tyrannies. Now, the truth hidden behind layers of post-war mythology is that the establishment of Israel was not merely a response to the Holocaust or an act of Western guilt. It was also the product of Soviet manipulation, geopolitical gambles, and the Zionist willingness to align with anyone necessary to birth their state. And the Zionist project, in its earliest and most fragile years, stood not only on the ashes of European Jewry, but on the silent nod of Joseph Stalin, a man who paradoxically helped build the very nation that his successors would spend decades trying to dismantle. This tells you guys that they're all in on it, and it's all a play. And they have to stage things. And they saw that there was a problem with Israel because some countries weren't going to go for it. So they asked Stalin to step in and make it happen. And they did. Then they said, oh, we made a mistake and pulled out. No, it's all controlled. This is a chessboard. This is a script that they put together. And they're doing the same thing to America right now. World War II was more than just a clash of nations and ideologies. It was a spiritual earthquake that shook the foundations of Christian civilization in the West. Beneath the military campaigns and political realignments was a targeted war on the very heart of Europe's spiritual identity. Christendom and the aftermath of World War II saw not merely the default of fascist regimes, but the dismantling of old Christian order that once unified Europe in moral, cultural, and religious visions. Well, you know what happens when that happens. One of the most overlooked consequences of the war, World War II, was the intentional decoupling of European identity from Christianity. Now, before the war, Europe was still largely rooted in national Christian values. Catholic, Orthodox, or Protestant. But after the war, as documents like that I have called The Bad War, a book that I found, and World War II Justifies the State of Israel, they emphasize a massive reprogramming that began. Christianity was subtly rebranded as dangerous when fused with nationalism. Sounds familiar? Associated with the rise of fascism, and thus delegitimized. In its place arose the cult of secularism, international humanism, and moral relativism. The church no longer stood as a guardian of truth. It was reduced to a relic, blamed in some cases for enabling tyranny. The denazification programs went far beyond removing symbols or punishing war criminals. They also erased the spiritual undercurrents of identity that made nations strong, cohesive, and morally grounded. Germany, once a bastion of Lutheran influence, was hollowed out. Italy, under papal influence for centuries, was reoriented towards a globalist Vatican II framework that distanced the church from its former militant orthodoxy. Even Britain, which had framed its war effort as a righteous crusade, was left spiritually fatigued and culturally disoriented. A key insight emerges from the research in a paper that I have called The Reasons Historians Call World War II a Jewish Creation, and another piece that I have called The Real Cause of World War II. The war was used as a divine judgment by some and as a surgical weapon by others. Zionism was elevated as the new spiritual axis, and Christianity, especially the traditional, nationalist, patriarchal kind, was quietly vilified. This wasn't accidental. The institutions built in the wake of World War II, the United Nations, IMF, and the EU, were all deliberately stripped of Christian identity and instead rooted in secular Enlightenment-era globalism. In this light, World War II functioned as the final act of a centuries-long revolution against Christendom, dating back to the Enlightenment, the French Revolution, and the World War I. The Christian remnant was left scattered. The Vatican lost its grip. Protestantism was divided and infiltrated by liberal theology. Orthodox nations were decimated by communism, and the global narrative shifted from Christ crucified to Holocaust memorials. From the cross of the Star of David, the suffering of the Jews became the new sacred symbol of the post-war West, replacing the suffering of Jesus Christ. And from this new axis, power was redrawn, not around the church, but around the State of Israel, the United Nations, and the bank and institutions that funded both. I hope you're getting something out of this, because I am. In spiritual terms, World War II was a war against the bride of Christ. And though the church remains, her power in the world had not been the same ever since. But the remnant remains, you guys, you and I, and the war is not over. You see, as the guns fell silent in 1945, a new kind of war began. One not fought on battlefields, but in boardrooms, treaties, and global summits. World War II was not the war to end all wars, but the engineered prelude to a new world order that enslaved nations through institutions, debt, psychological trauma, and manufactured guilt. The very trauma of the war became the cornerstone upon which a global elite built their empire, politically, economically, and spiritually. My archives reveal, particularly the one called The Real Reason for World War II Was Economic and The Bad War, they reveal that the destruction of nation states served as fertile ground for supranational bodies like the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and NATO. These institutions were not conceived to preserve peace, but to ensure control. The United Nations, cloaked in peacekeeping language, established frameworks to override national sovereignty. And the International Monetary Fund and World Bank entangled war-ravaged countries in debt traps that replaced armies with financial servitude. NATO ensured the Western Bloc remained militarized under Anglo-American command, not national autonomy. And the centerpiece of this post-war structure was the creation of the State of Israel. The Holocaust narrative, rightly evoking the world's deepest sympathies, was leveraged to sanctify its establishment and criminalize dissent. And any challenge to Zionist objectives or Israel's foreign policy would be framed as anti-Semitism, allowing a moral shield around one nation, while all others were pushed towards open borders, secularism, and surveillance. This double standard served as a purpose to keep Israel protected as a spiritual and financial hub, while the West was diluted, divided, and dumbed down. Why isn't there an anti-defamation league for black people, for Mexicans, for white people, for all other kinds of races? Why isn't there an anti-defamation league for the Orthodox people? Economically, World War II allowed the global central banking network, spearheaded by the Bank for International Settlements, to reshape the monetary order. The war destroyed the gold-backed economic models and ushered in the Bretton Woods system, which linked the world to the U.S. dollar. But even this was temporary. Once the petrodollar system replaced gold entirely, a new form of empire emerged, an empire of fiat debt, enforced by sanctions and wars and justified by the trauma of a post-war that no one was allowed to fully question. Surveillance technologies, now ubiquitous, also find their origins in World War II. Radar, code breaking, early computing, and intelligence sharing between allied nations evolved to a post-war surveillance state. Operation Paperclip brought the Nazi scientists into the U.S. labs, not just for rocketry, but for psychological warfare, population control, and medical experiments. The very governments that defeated fascism now implemented its tools under new names. In spiritual terms, the post-World War II order produced a world that no longer looked to heaven, but to bureaucrats and technocrats for salvation. God was replaced by government, Scripture by charter, and Christ by compliance. Israel, rather than being the culmination of prophetic fulfillment, became the keystone for geopolitical manipulation. And the trauma of World War II became a permanent ritual, a justification for censorship, control, and the silencing of those who dared to ask who truly won the war. This is why Bibi can kill a bunch of people. No one does shit. World War II did not end in 1945. It simply changed forms. And unless the remnant sees the structure for what it is, a global counterfeit kingdom rising on the ashes of Christendom, it will continue to rule. But once exposed, the lie collapses and the lamb, well, not the beast, shall have the final word. Now, World War II did not just rearrange the borders. It rewrote the architecture of power, faith, memory, and morality. It was the accidental outcome of nationalism run amok, nor a spontaneous clash between good and evil. Rather, as the collective witness of my information that I show, it was a pre-scripted ritual of destruction, an elite engineered fire meant to burn away the remnants of Christian sovereignty, economic independence, and moral clarity. In its place, they constructed the pillars of the modern world: Zionist dominance, supranational governance, global finance, and a permanent culture of fear and guilt. The war ended kingships and elevated technocrats. It replaced God-ordained nationhood with centralized bureaucracies. It weaponized compassion for the Jews and their suffering into a shield for geopolitical conquest. And it buried truth under the rubble of moral outrage, making inquiry itself a crime. It did not liberate man. It branded him, counted him, and made him easier to program. But more than any economic or political change, World War II was a spiritual rupture. It marked the end of Christendom as a dominant force. Christianity, once the moral compass of the West, was deconstructed through shame, disillusionment, and infiltration. It became tame, divided, and worldly, just as intended. And the true remnant now stands among the ruins, forced to navigate a world rebuilt in opposition to the kingdom of God. Yet from this ruin, there is revelation. We now see clearly that the war truly was, or what it was, not a mere conflict of nations, but a chess move in the long war between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. Every sacrifice was scripted. Every alliance was arranged. Every villain and victim chosen to shape the new order. The war itself was a veil, and behind it were Zionists, bankers, occult planners, and fallen powers labored to counterfeit the kingdom, to enthrone a false Messiah, and control the Temple Mount of global thought. But we must remember what they forgot. We must remember what they forgot. The stone not cut by hands. The remnant does not bow to history's victors. It learns, it discerns, and it endures. As the system birthed in 1945 begins to crack under their own weight, we prepare not to restore the world that they built, but to witness the one that God wills. The war is not over, but their illusion is.
Why do 75% of people feel exhausted all the time? The answer might surprise you. In the 1920s, Standard Oil decided to dive into medicine. They pushed synthetic petroleum into our drugs. Sure, it masked symptoms, but it wrecked our guts. Our good bacteria, which fight off parasites and heavy metals, got wiped out by crude oil. But here's the good news. We can fix this by going back to nature. Introducing Elite Potion, the world's top detox program. It restores your good bacteria by removing toxic threats like aluminum, strontium, barium, and parasites. Imagine feeling energized and alive again. They said there couldn't be a pill that did it all. We invented it. Visit elitepotion.com and reclaim your health from synthetic pharmaceuticals. Your body will thank you.
This has been Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Tune in tomorrow night when God gives me another revelation to tell you guys all about. God bless you, God keep you, and God thank you for supporting my show. Go to jamescarner.com and sign up for my newsletter. That's the only way I could get a hold of you just in case. And download my free books. They're there for you. They're PDFs. They're all yours. Also, go to elitepotion.com and sign up for my award-winning parasite and heavy metal remover. You'll feel better. It's what's attacking the temple, and God will be happier, I promise. And if you could all do me one big favor, if you could all just try to love your neighbor, well, I do believe this world would be a better place. We'll see you tomorrow.